By the time Nikola Tesla died alone in a New York hotel room, the world was being transformed by an electrical system he had helped make possible. But the man who wanted to transmit power across the planet had lost control of his own future. How did that happen? Look out the window of a hotel room in New York City in the late 1930s or early 1940s. That not a fine suite, that a room, that a place a man stays when he has no house, no laboratory, no family waiting. The city below is alive with electric light. Signs flash, streetcars hum. Thousands of windows glow with lamps powered by alternating current. The system you helped build, the system that changed the world. Inside the room, the light is less certain. Papers lie in careful stacks. Notes, diagrams, plans for machines no one has funded. Plans for towers no one will build. The telephone may ring, but the call is likely from a hotel manager that a bill is due, that a reporter wants a strange quote, that a stranger wants a favor. The world outside is bright, busy, and moving. In here, the future is stalled. You are an old man now. You have lived in hotels for years. You are famous and forgotten at the same time. You still dress with care. You still speak with formality. You still believe in the future, but the city outside is running on a system you gave away, fought for, and never fully controlled. The current moves. The man sits still. This is not the story of a genius nobody understood. It is the story of a man who won one of the biggest technological battles in history, then kept reaching for a future too large, too expensive, and too difficult to control. You were not born in New York. You were born in a village called Smiljan in 1856, in the Austrian Empire, in a region that would later be part of Croatia. Your family was Serbian. Your father was an Orthodox priest. Your mother was not formally educated, but she could build things. She made tools. She managed a household with ingenuity. You inherited her hands, her memory, and her refusal to accept that a thing could not be done. As a boy, you watched nature move. Water turned wheels. Wind bent trees. Light appeared from storms. You began to see the world as a system of forces. You built small machines. You imagined ones that did not exist. In school, you solved problems so quickly that teachers sometimes suspected you of cheating. You were not cheating. You were seeing the answer before the others had finished reading the question. Then came illness. In your youth, you fell into fevers. You saw flashes of light. You heard sounds from far away. Your senses became too sharp. Some accounts suggest you could hear a watch ticking from across a room. The exact details are uncertain, but one thing is clear. The same nervous intensity that made you ill also made you imagine machines in full detail before you touched a pencil. You studied engineering in grass. There, you saw something that would shape your life. A demonstration of a direct current machine. It sparked. It was loud. It needed a part called a commutator to keep the current moving in one direction. You watched it and said, in essence, that the machine was wrong, not broken. Wrong in principle. Your professor thought you were arrogant. Maybe you were. But you had seen another way. A current that did not move in one direction, only. A current that alternated. A magnetic field that rotated. If you could create a rotating magnetic field, you could make a motor that did not need a commutator. You could make a motor that was simple, reliable, powerful. The idea did not arrive as a vague notion. It arrived as a vision. You were walking in a park in Budapest. You were reciting poetry. And then the answer appeared. A rotating magnetic field. A motor. A system. You drew it in the sand with a stick. You could see the whole machine turning in your mind. But seeing it was not the same as proving it. Proving it was not the same as building it. And building it was not the same as making anyone trust it. You went to Paris. You worked for one of Edison's European companies. You repaired equipment. You solved problems others could not. You were young, brilliant, and impatient. You worked through the night. You studied the direct current systems around you and saw their limits. They could send power only a short distance. They needed thick copper wires. They needed a power station every mile or so. They were expensive and fragile. Alternating current could travel farther. It could change voltage with a transformer. The IT could step up to high voltage for long-distance transmission, then step down for safe use in homes and factories. The problem was that no one had built a practical alternating current motor. You believed you had solved that problem, but you could not build it in Paris. You needed a place where money, industry, and ambition moved faster. You sailed to America in 1884. That you arrived in New York with almost nothing. Some accounts say you had a few cents, a book of poems, and a letter of introduction. The exact details are uncertain. You found work connected to Edison's companies. You fixed machines. You impressed people with your stamina and your strange, precise memory. The relationship between you and Edison was not a simple comic book feud. Edison was a practical inventor and businessman. He had built a direct current empire. He had factories, investors, and a reputation. You worked in his world, but you never stopped believing in alternating current. You tried to explain it. You met resistance. Not because everyone was foolish, because direct current was already installed, already familiar, already making money. The famous story about Edison offering you $50,000 to improve his machines, then calling it a joke when you asked for payment, may or may not be true. Some accounts suggest it. Others do not. That we do not know exactly. What is certain is that you left Edison's orbit. You went out on your own. For a time, you dug ditches. You worked with your hands. You knew you had a revolution in your head, but the world did not care. That a man with a vision and no money is just a man. You ate little. You slept little. You kept the rotating magnetic field turning behind your eyes. Then investors came. A few men willing to take a risk. You formed a company. You built motors. You filed patents. In 1887 and 1888, you demonstrated a complete polyphase alternating current system. It included generators, transformers, motors, and transmission lines. It worked, and that was when the real battle began. George Westinghouse saw the value of your patents. He was not an inventor in your style, that he was an industrialist with courage. He had already made money in railroads and air brakes. He understood that alternating current could carry electricity over long distances. He understood that the future would need power in every city, not just a few city blocks. He bought the rights to your polyphase AC patents in 1888. Now you had a partner. But you also had enemies. Not personal enemies, economic enemies. The direct current companies saw alternating current as a threat. They spread fear. They held public demonstrations where animals were electrocuted with alternating current to prove it was dangerous. They used the word executioner for AC equipment. They pushed laws to limit its use. This was the war of the currents. It was not a private duel between you and Edison. It was an industrial, financial, technical, and public battle involving many people. Engineers, investors, politicians, newspaper editors, city officials. The future of electricity was being decided not in a laboratory alone, but in boardrooms, courtrooms, and city streets. You stayed mostly in the laboratory. You lectured. You demonstrated. You built coils that produced high-voltage, high-frequency currents. You held glowing tubes in your hands. You showed that alternating current could be made safe and spectacular. You became a scientific celebrity, but celebrity was not the same as victory. The victory came when Westinghouse's company won the contract to light the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The fair was a chance to show alternating current on an enormous scale. Hundreds of thousands of visitors, acres of pavilions. The largest display of electric light the world had ever seen. The stakes were simple. If the system failed, alternating current would look like a dangerous fantasy. If it worked, the world would see that power could travel far, light thousands of lamps at once, and do it without a power station on every corner. The night came. The switch was thrown. The darkness broke. The fairgrounds blazed with light. Buildings glowed. Fountains shone. Visitors stood still. Some covered their eyes. Some cheered. You watched an impossible idea become real in front of a crowd. Then came Niagara Falls. The project was larger than the fair. The goal was to send power from the falls to Buffalo, more than 20 miles away. 20 miles. That was beyond anything direct current could do economically. Your polyphase AC system made it possible. The machinery was built. The lines were strung. The current began to flow to in 1896. Electricity reached Buffalo. This was the moment, the first major payoff. You had not invented electricity. You had not built the modern world alone. But you had helped solve the central problem of moving power across distance. The current you imagined in a Budapest park was now turning motors in a city 20 miles from its source. The world would never go back. Alternating current became the standard. The system you helped create would power cities, factories, homes, and farms. The battle was over. You had won. But winning the battle would not satisfy you. Because you had already begun to think of the next thing. Not just power for a city, power for the whole planet. Not just wires and motors, communication without wires, machines that could think, light that could carry signals, energy that could be sent through the earth itself. You had helped light the fair. Then you began chasing something no fairground could contain. You built the Tesla coil that it produced enormous voltages. It created spectacular arcs of lightning in your laboratory. That it was a tool for exploring high-frequency currents. You dreamed of using it to transmit energy through the air. You dreamed of a world without wires. You experimented with X-rays, though others were doing the same. You worked with fluorescent lighting. You studied radio waves. You demonstrated a remote-controlled boat in 1898. A small boat that obeyed your commands from a distance. The crowd was stunned. Some people thought you were controlling it by magic or hidden cables. You were not. You were showing the beginning of wireless control, but you did not invent radio alone. Others made vital contributions. Guglielmo Marconi, Heinrich Hertz, and many others built pieces of the puzzle. You had your own work, your own patents, your own claims. The history of radio is tangled, with many contributors that do not simplify it. What you gave the world was not a single invention. It was a vision of a connected future. And that vision demanded more than a laboratory. It demanded a tower. You went to Colorado Springs in 1899. That you built a laboratory at high altitude. You generated enormous electrical discharges. You studied the Earth's electrical properties. You believed you could send signals around the world. Some accounts say you detected signals you thought came from another planet. The exact details are uncertain. What is clear is that Colorado Springs convinced you that global wireless transmission was possible. You returned to New York with a plan. A grand station on Long Island. Wardenclyffe. A tower rising above the trees. A laboratory below. The goal was not simply to send messages. The goal was to transmit power. To send electrical energy through the earth and the air. To make power available anywhere without wires. The money came from investors. J.P. Morgan was among them. But the money was not enough. The project grew. The promises grew. You told investors the system would change the world. They wanted to know how it would make money. You talked about broadcasting power. They asked who would pay for it. You said the world would benefit. They asked again about profit. The gap between your vision and their system of funding widened. Meanwhile, Marconi succeeded in sending a wireless signal across the Atlantic in 1901. That he used equipment that overlapped with your work. You believed he had used your patents. The legal battles dragged on. The financial pressure mounted. Workers at Wardenclyffe were not paid. The tower stood unfinished. The dream of global wireless power was too large, too expensive, and too difficult to control. You kept asking for more money. The investors said no. Not because they were villains, because they could not see a return. The project was not a completed global free energy machine. It was an unfinished experiment, speculative and unproven. To treat it as a suppressed miracle is to misunderstand what happened. Wardenclyffe failed because the technology was not ready, the financing was not sustainable, and the vision was too vast for any single backer to carry. You lost the lease in 1915. The tower was later demolished for scrap. The dream ended. Not with an explosion, with silence. The current had reached the city. His money had not. This was the reversal. Not a quick business detail. A deep wound. You had helped build the electrical age. You had seen the world adopt your system. But when you reached for something greater, the world did not follow. You were left with patents that no longer earned enough, with a laboratory gone, with a reputation that shifted from genius to eccentric. The world had adopted the electrical future you helped build. Why was the inventor now being left behind by it? The answer is not simple. Partly it was money. Partly it was the scale of your ideas. Partly it was your refusal to make your vision smaller than it was. You would not build a small product. You would not become an executive. You would not explain your work in terms of quarterly profit. You kept describing the future as a single, connected system. The world wanted devices. You wanted transformation. Your later years were not a single collapse. They were a long erosion. You lived in hotels. You moved from one to another. The Hotel New Yorker became your home for years. You worked alone. You made announcements. You promised new inventions. A particle beam. A death ray, as the press called it. Some of these claims were speculative. Some were impractical. Some were never realized. You remained capable of imagination, but the distance between imagination and demonstration grew wider. You fed pigeons. You cared for them. You did not mock your own habits, and we should not either. A man who has given everything to the future may seek comfort in small living things. That a man who has been left behind may be tender toward creatures the city ignores. You were not a saint, not a wizard, not a superhero, not a madman, not a victim of a hidden conspiracy. You were brilliant, ambitious, stubborn, theatrical, commercially vulnerable, capable of misjudgment, and unable to make your vision smaller than it was. You made promises you could not keep. You held grudges. You dismissed rivals. You spent money on ideas that never worked. You believed the world would eventually see what you saw, and in some ways it did. But not in time for you. Not in the way you wanted. The city outside your hotel room never stopped using alternating current. IT grew brighter. IT grew louder. IT built taller towers. It sent power across rivers and mountains. IT carried voices through the AI. IT became the connected world you imagined. But it did not preserve your place in IT. IT used fragments of your vision and moved on. You died on January 7th, 1943. Alone in a hotel room. The city outside still glowed. The current still moved. Your body was found. Your papers were examined. The world noted your passing and then returned to its business. What survived? Not every prediction, not every machine, not every claim, but vital work on polyphase AC systems. A vision of technology that could move power across distance. A way of thinking about energy as a system, not a collection of isolated machines. The modern electrical grid owes something to the rotating magnetic field you saw in a Budapest park. You did not invent the internet. You did not invent smartphones. You did not single-handedly build the modern world. But you saw the shape of a connected future earlier than most, and you paid a price for seeing it too clearly, too soon, too alone. The world is full of men who made their ideas smaller so they could sell them. You could not do that. Maybe that was your failure. Maybe that was your gift. A hotel room. A city of light. An old man with a head full of unfinished machines. The current outside was yours, but it no longer needed you. That is the cost of building the future. IT moves faster than the people who imagined it. Still, the current kept moving.